Welcome to the African Global Insights channel with your host, Stephen Agee. Let's get to it. Has democracy been a win for African people? Is democracy necessary for African people to live a peaceful and prosperous existence? Let's talk about it. So what is democracy? Or specifically, what is Western or liberal democracy? So Western democracy refers to the political system that emerged and evolved in Western Europe and North America, typically characterized by principles such as liberalism and individual rights, representative government. This is a government where the citizens elect representatives to make decisions on their behalf. Also, rule of law. The rule of law ensures that everyone, including government officials, is subject to the law. It promotes equality under the law. Also, there's separation of powers, where the government is divided into branches. Like in the U.S., there's an executive, legislative, and judicial branch. And those branches provide checks and balances against each other. Also, there's free and fair elections. There's pluralism in political parties and media freedom. So liberal democracy just refers to a specific type of democracy that emphasizes individual freedoms and the protections of civil liberties, plus is non-geographically specific, right? So liberal democracy is a broader term that can apply to any country, regardless of geographical location, that uphold these principles. It is a form of governance found in many Western democracies, but also can be seen in non-Western countries, like Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, and others. So in short, most Western democracies are liberal democracies, but not all liberal democracies are Western democracies, if that makes sense. It's geographically specific. Are democracies corruptible? Of course they are. Corruption in Western democracies can manifest in several ways, and this happens despite its core values. There are many areas where corruption can occur, but let's review some of the key areas of corruption that's relevant to the African situation. Number one, influence of money in politics. So wealthy individuals, corporations, and interest groups can have a disproportionate influence over policy decisions by funding political campaigns, or just straight up giving money to politicians, and this creates a form of legal corruption. This can result in policies that favor special interests over the general public. Cronyism and nepotism. Yeah, this is a big one. Politicians may favor friends, family, and loyalists by awarding them government contracts, jobs, and other benefits, regardless of merit or qualifications. Also, there's a revolving door politics where officials may move between public office and the private sector. And this is troublesome because if they've been in public office and they've regulated certain industries, but they're looking to move into a position in those industries after they get out of politics, this can lead to a conflict of interest. And it can result in policies that benefit certain industries at the expense of the public. Also, media manipulation and disinformation. Concentration of media ownership. In the United States, there are only 6 corporations that own all of major media. And this is troublesome. And this is why you see an echo chamber a lot of times, where a lot of the media, whether it's on TV or in print, they say or they print the exact same thing, even though they're in different media outlets. Disinformation campaigns, that's an issue. And we all know that that's even a bigger issue now with social media. The erosion of rule of law. So legal loopholes and weak regulations. This happens when politicians write rules and regulations and laws that have they're written poorly, meaning they're very vague. They leave room for manipulation, and it's really an issue in a lot of countries, in African countries as well as in the West and everywhere else. because they allow for like really corrupt practices such as tax evasion by corporations or wealthy individuals. And it's easy to do. It's very easy to do. As the laws are written, you just write them in a way that has a back door or some kind of loophole. And but otherwise, it looks and sounds very good. And there you have it, right? Or selective enforcement of laws. In some cases, law may not be applied equally, with wealthy or politically connected individuals escaping punishment for wrongdoing. Another, judicial and law enforcement corruption. So this is rampant all over, right? Appointment to the judiciary may be influenced by political motivations, undermining the impartiality of courts. And as far as law enforcement is concerned, this happens when enforcement agencies are co-opted by political leaders or fail to act impartially, and this can erode public trust in the justice system. Now, with all of those are ways that you can corrupt democracies. But in my view, here's the biggest one as it relates to African countries: undue influence from international entities. Corporate influence and globalization. Large multinational corporations can exert pressure on national governments to shape policies, often threatening to move jobs or investments unless favorable laws are passed. This weakens democratic accountability. Also, with foreign influence, foreign governments may attempt to influence elections or political decisions in Western democracies through both covert operations and financial incentives. This is the big one, everyone. So, when it comes to democracy is like a Trojan horse in which the Western foreign entities use to gain power over African nations and get unfettered access to its natural resources. While the belly of the Trojan horse is neocolonialism. So, neocolonialism in Africa refers to the continued economic, political, and cultural dominance of former colonial powers and external actors over African nations after formal independence. So, the foreign influence or the undue influence from international entities, that's the big one. That's the one, and that's the Trojan horse that allows all of the other illegal activity to go on. And unfortunately, this is allowed under Western democracies. And this is how they get people to buy into it. They tell people with Western democracy, oh, the people rule and the people make the decisions. That's not the case. The case is that that's what's said on the outside, but once you get Western democracy on the inside and you start implementing it, you understand that it starts to be run and influenced from the outside, from outside your country and from Western countries. So once the Trojan horse is inside the gate, what tricks and traps are inside the neocolonial belly? Number one, economic dependence, control over national resources. This is a very big one, and many African countries rely heavily on exporting raw minerals like oil, gold, and agricultural products, which are often controlled by foreign multinational corporations. These corporations, backed by their home governments, influence local African governments to adopt policies that prioritize corporate interests over the well-being of citizens. Also, there's debt dependency. Post-colonial African states often look on significant loans from international financial institutions like IMF and World Bank or foreign governments. This is a debt trap. And this debt trap is created by these loans. They often force African governments to implement structural or what they call structural adjustment program or SAPs that prioritize repayment of the loan over social services, which exacerbates poverty. Also, foreign aid and conditionalities. Foreign aid, while providing much needed resources, often come with political conditions that can distort the democratic process. Number 2, political influence and interference, which includes support for autocratic leaders. And we know what this is, right? So it's just foreign powers propping up leaders who will do their bidding, and they're mainly called puppets, as we know. It also includes manipulation of elections, right? So this can take the form of funding preferred candidates or providing biased media coverage or even directly intervening in the electoral process. Yeah, or even in some cases, if things are not going in their favor, they just foment a coup, right? Number 3, military intervention and security alliances. Now, this is a big one, and this is one that's growing, right? So several African countries, a lot of African countries, host foreign military bases or are involved in security agreements with foreign powers, right? It's like, for example, the U.S. AFRICOM, right? Or France's military presence in West Africa. These arrangements are often justified by the need for regional stability or counterterrorism efforts. But we know that that's not the whole story. But these military bases, boots on the ground, is a big issue. And with boots on the ground introduces weapons actually on the ground, right? So you have boots on the ground, you have personnel there, you have increasing weapons coming into the continent, which means that things are just getting hotter and hotter, and the chances for conflict are going up, right? Cultural and ideological dominance. Number 4, Western cultural hegemony. So with neocolonialism, it extends to that cultural and ideological influence where Western media, education, and consumer culture dominate in many African countries. This can undermine the development of local political ideologies and governance systems that are more reflective of African values instead of promoting Western-style democracies that may not align with local needs or traditions. That's a very big issue. Also, the brain drain, which we know a lot of African citizens and students leaving to never return, is a really big issue. But there's a dependency on foreign experts that's also very troubling. African governments often rely on foreign consultants or NGOs for expertise, which can perpetuate neocolonial dynamics by implementing foreign solutions to local problems. Very big issue. Number 5, economic exploitation and the resource curse. This is what I have an issue here. So first, let's talk about the exploitation of resources by foreign companies. We all know about that. We all know how that works. It's a very, very big problem. And again, it just exacerbates poverty with local communities. And this whole idea of the resource curse, I never liked that. I never liked that term, the resource curse. If you're a country or a community that has been blessed with resources, valuable resources, it should never be looked at as a curse. That's a blessing, right? The problem is, because those resources are there are people that want to steal them. So what you have is not a resource curse. What you have is a criminal problem, right? You're being jacked, you're being mugged, you're being attacked for these resources, right? It's theft, right? So if you give me $10,000, 10,000 US dollars, and I put it in my pocket and I go outside and I get mugged. Somebody by knife point or gun point takes my money. And I'm like, oh man, that's really unfortunate. And then another month, you give me another 10,000 and I walk out and somebody mugs me for that money again. I don't have a money problem, people. I have a criminal problem. There's a theft problem. I don't have a money problem. I don't have a money curse. Right? That money is a blessing. I have a problem with criminality, and that's what I have to solve, and it's the same thing in Africa. There is no such thing as a resource curse. You have a thievery problem. You have a criminal problem. That's just the way I look at it. So number 6, structural adjustment programs and austerity. So many African countries were pressured by international financial institutions to adopt structural adjustment programs, or SAPs, as a condition for receiving loans. These programs often required drastic cuts to social spending, privatization of state enterprises, and the removal of subsidies, leading to widespread economic hardship. SAPs were designed and enforced by external actors, undermining the ability of democratically elected governments to shape their own economic policies. This has a big impact on public services, and this is where austerity comes in. So if you ever hear that term austerity, there are measures imposed by SAPs reducing the funding for education, healthcare, and other essential services, increasing inequality and public dissatisfaction. This is the problem. And we're going to talk about this a little bit as we go along in another model of democracy. So foreign-backed development models. It's number 7, imposition of Western economic models. Neocolonialism often manifests in the imposition of Western-style development models that may not be suited to African contexts. This is also a very big, and this is a really big one, because once they implement some of these other things and then they put a model in and say, hey, you follow this economic model, you're locked in. Then you're locked in. And any movement away, any quick movement away from these economic models is going to cause pain for the nation, right? Or more pain for the nation. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid, right? Really quickly. You're going to feel that pain. And so these countries are usually locked into it. Also, external development aid, as you're seeing a lot of development aid on the continent, especially with China. And these can also be problematic, but they're problematic over time. As you're unable to pay back loans or meet the commitment of these contracts, then you start giving away sovereignty, or you start giving away national property, land, buildings, that kind of thing, right? So in conclusion, neocolonialism in Africa has played a significant role in undermining democracy. It perpetuates economic dependence, political interference, and cultural domination. However, and I just think that this is democracy, the way that it's been packaged and delivered to countries in Africa, has been absolutely devastating. It's been absolutely devastating. However, I've talked about Western democracy, and I kind of Western/liberal democracy. But there's another type of democracy that maybe should be given a look. It's not very popular, and I don't even know any country that employs this widely, but it's called direct democracy. So direct democracy is a form of direct participation of citizens in the democratic decision-making. Direct democracies may operate through an assembly of citizens or by means of a referenda and initiatives in which citizens vote on issues instead of for candidates or parties. So with direct democracies, you can put a referendum on the board and then everybody in the country votes on it. So if there's a new IMF or World Bank a loan that they want to give the country, right? And you have the specifics of that contract, you can make that public, and then you can have a referendum to let the people vote on whether the country should take the loan or not, right? This is a better type of democracy, in my view, and you can even really do it still with a representative democracy, with a representative form of democracy, but you need to have a mechanism where you can somehow compel your representatives to call a referendum on these type of issues. So that's just another way to look at it. And if you did have a direct democracy, it would greatly reduce the power of elected officials and give people ultimate power over how their country is governed and managed, which would be a great thing, but a horrible thing for politicians who want to keep power. So for democracy to truly flourish in Africa, there needs to be like a focus on reducing external influence and strengthening local institutions and fostering self-determination. Like I said, and I want to say this again because I think this is very important. The way democracy is packaged as a Trojan horse, and it's neocolonialism as the belly or the stomach of it, and inside that stomach, all of these bad things. But the worst is the external influence and the external powers and these actors that come in and do all these things in your country, and the people feel as though they have no power to stop it. That's the main thing. Maybe African countries need to come up with their own form of government, maybe a new form of government that reflects their values and their traditions and takes into account their history. I think that would probably be the best. I mean, you could also use some of the attributes from some other models, but you get it for yourself and you put it in your country and make it work. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it. But as far as democracy overall, to me, democracy is one of the most puzzling, most misunderstood, and powerful tools against the African populace that has ever existed. That's just my view. So what do you think? What do you think of democracy, and what do you think of democratic practices on the African continent? We'd love to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment in the comment section. And as always, I look forward to the conversation. I'm out.